What I need from Deadwood is a fucking prequel series set in Australia when like Al was there just like hanging out, because I would watch the shit out of that.
Hello and welcome to Vassals of Kingsgrave. In today's episode, we will be discussing Season 3 of the HBO series Deadwood. This is a continuation of Season 1 and Season 2. At the end, we're probably going to tack on a brief discussion of Deadwood, the movie, which came out in, fill in the year, 2017, 18? I don't know. So today I'm joined by Bina.
Hey guys, this is Bina 007.
Dana
on the forums.
And Michael.
Hi, I'm Michael, or Mordian on the forums.
I am Thomas, FT Ward, on the former podcast of Ice and Fire forums. I don't know if they'll ever be back.
I don't imagine. Maybe our forum names are less helpful.
So the third season and the final aired season is my least favorite season. But if we could go through, maybe if you each want to give us your thoughts on the third season and we did Can of Peaches ratings for the first two seasons. So out of 5, Bina, what are your general thoughts on the third season, and what would your Can of Peaches rating be?
I mean, I wasn't on the original Deadwoods, right? So for context, I started watching this. Thomas, Michael and I have done a bit of a rewatch through some of the HBO classics, starting with Wire and then on to The Sopranos. And to me, the first season of Deadwood was something like the most perfect television season I've ever seen. Just faultless. So like 5 cans of peaches, doesn't even begin to summarize it. And then 2 wasn't quite as good, but was still probably a solid 5 relative to other TV. And I was a bit worried about 3 because you guys had expressed that you maybe didn't like it as much. And I did find it a bit more of a slog, especially early on. I'd probably come out and give it a 3. And I'm basically knocking a point for difficulties I had with the final episode and the choices that Al makes, and whether they're credible as situated in character, and which Dana and I chatted a bit about on the VOC Discord. And I'm docking a point for, I think it was an error to make Hearst's character alter so wildly from season 2 and to make him more of an almost unvarnished bad guy. Because I think part of what made Deadwood so good in 1 and 2 is you've got Al, who's basically a selfish profiteer, but is redeemed by being partly good too. And then you've got Seth, who's basically good, but is much more interesting because he can occasionally lose his temper and is partly bad. So you have very nuanced characters. And I just felt Hearst became just something altogether less interesting. And it was interesting seeing the town sort of rally up to fight him, but he himself just wasn't that interesting.
Dana, what about you?
It's been about a year since I watched season 3, so a lot of this is in hindsight. So I give it like 4 cans of peaches with cinnamon, like just a little bit. But I think it's because when I first watched season 3, and like the second and third time I watched season 3, I did get frustrated with the main characters, but seeing it's been a while since I've watched them, the things that I remember about season 3 are they're not minor characters, but like the sub-main characters, their stories I really enjoyed. Yeah, 4, like a solid 4. I enjoyed it. Looking back, I enjoy season 3 more than season 2 somehow. But I do agree, like, Hearst being an all-out villain is a bit iffy. Like, he becomes very boring, where he was very interesting in season 2. But it's really hard to give season 3 a rating after watching the movie sometimes. Like, at least I feel.
Just one thing to say, I haven't watched the movie yet, so I'd appreciate no movie spoilers if that's okay.
Oh, that's absolutely fine. I would need to rewatch the movie to remember things.
Same. Michael, what about you?
I think probably I'm gonna go sub 3. That was what I was trying to decide whether I would say 3 just because I did. Overall, probably. I mean, it was certainly. It's not like I was watching every episode wishing that it was over or anything. Definitely, a lot of the Langrishe stuff I was watching, and I mean, maybe to some degree it's not fair because they didn't get their season 4, and presumably they had lots of things that they wanted to do with Langrishe, but so much of the Langrishe stuff, which I didn't remember. Like I remembered him as a character, but like I didn't remember any of the like watching him in this old. It was just like they brought. I don't know. Like they tried to pull an emotional response for me for this for this old actor dying who I've never met before. It's like to the extent that like they wanted me to feel sad about whatever Bullock's kid the previous season. Like at least I don't know. At least he'd been in the show for a few episodes before they tried to make me feel bad about it. And then like to be fair, to be totally honest, I'm not 100% sure what the fuck was going on with that younger woman. If that was his daughter and the older woman was like I have no earthly fucking idea what was happening. Like maybe I was drunk watching it and I should have picked up on something and I didn't. Anyway, so a lot of the Langrishe stuff didn't work for me. Hearst also, I agree with Bina that I think that they made a mistake painting him so negatively, just so like completely villainously in the third season, because at the end of the third season I just felt like what have we been doing for 2 seasons now? Like Alma sells her claim and then Hearst leaves, and that's what we've gotten. And it would be one thing if he wasn't so much of a villain.
I don't get it. Like I don't I mean I don't get what the scam is.
Yeah.
Like
but it did seem the show
seemed like a lot of trouble to go through. Go ahead, Michael.
No, I mean I was saying like the show seemed to be telling us clearly that it was a scam, but I also don't have any idea what the scam would have been or why Hearst would have been so sure that it was a scam that he decided to have him killed.
It felt like Odell was being disingenuous with Hearst in their interactions, yes. But what the scam, I mean, Hearst is going to send a geologist there, right, to look into it.
Of course.
And that's going to cost X number, but he's
Odell's
not going to start pouring money into it if there's nothing there. I don't.
Yeah, and like Aunt Lou seemed like as soon as she heard, as soon as she heard the pitch, she seemed certain that it was a scam.
Yeah.
Right, and I don't know why. I don't know how she came to that conclusion either. Like I don't know. Like maybe I'm missing obvious things, but
I've seen the seasons like 4. I don't know how many times I've seen it, and I still don't understand.
Odell was overstepping his mark, and that's why Hearst had him killed. So it's not just that Hearst gets scammed all the time. Odell was using Aunt Lou to scam Hearst, which was a massive thing about his pride and his relationships. So, which is a lot of Hearst's stuff, I guess. So I thought he had Odell killed just because it's like, how dare you step out of place? Like, even with Aunt Lou, he seems like he favors her, but he still treats her like a servant and his cook. He has those very definite lines. So for Odell to breach those lines was too much for Hearst, which is one of the reasons that he had him killed. He didn't want Odell messing with essentially his servant, which is how he views Aunt Lou, right? So it was just like, how dare you mess with my things? I will get rid of you. And it kind of shows that Hearst's ruthlessness extends to everyone. Like, it doesn't matter if you have a familial relationship with someone who seems to be favored by him, he still will treat you like Elmsworth.
But so do you think that there was a scam though?
Oh, for sure. Like, Odell just didn't realize how bright Hearst was.
What was this? Like, I don't think that there's any question. I mean, there's no question to my mind that Hearst would kill anybody who tried to scam him.
Odell overreached.
I just don't see what the scam was.
But what
or
was
why,
the scam? What was Odell's plot? I mean, that's what. Yeah.
or how
He essentially
more
wanted
than,
Hearst to buy land without seeing it, without realizing that Hearst would never do that. So Adele just tried to do a scam on a much greater scale than he should have.
But I mean,
It's like
Odell didn't
it's like a classic gold scam. Like we had them in Australia all the time. Like,
But Odell didn't seem like wrong-footed at all when Hearst said, "Obviously, I'll send a man with you back to Liberia." Odell was like, "Yeah, of course you will." Right? Odell wasn't like, "Oh, yeah." Right? I mean, like, we didn't get anything from Odell indicating that he, like, Odell should have run away in the middle of the night, right? If somebody coming with him back to Liberia would ruin the scam, then Odell should have been like, "Oh fuck, I'm fucked," and run off, right? And he didn't do that. He was like,
oh
"Yeah,
no,
let's go
like
to Liberia."
I don't know if I'm filling in way too many blanks, but I always felt like the geologist would have gone back with Odell, and Odell would have killed the geologist to be like, he died of yellow fever, like everyone does in Liberia, essentially, or malaria or whatever tropical fever. Not even that Liberia is that tropical, but you know, you could essentially say he died, but I'm going to forge a note. That's me filling in blanks. Like a bad con man runs out in the middle of the night, a good con man keeps it going to see where he can get it.
Mm-hmm.
I have to say, I did like seeing Black characters being given more space in this season and exploring, you know, Aunt Lou in her own environment being very sort of, you know, confident and charismatic, but having to put on this sort of, you know, this mammy type persona in front of Hearst, and just how deferential she had to be was actually remarkably painful to watch. And then in the final episode, which I happened to watch, kind of, I think it was either the day or the day after the US presidential election, and seeing, you know, this incredibly blatant racist behavior towards the Black man who wants to vote. And then him thinking, because of the violence that's threatened upon him, you know what, he actually says, I'm gonna back away. And then after saying, no, you get back into line, you know, again with very sort of nasty racial epithets. But it was just interesting to see Deadwood sort of try and explore some of those issues. And I thought it did it really well. I mean, in very, very hard to watch, harsh language, in the same way that it deals with all of its subjects, right, with a very unblinking eye. But I thought that was really good this season.
Yeah, I would just say that the little general refers to himself with that racial epithet. So when Charlie
yes
says it, I don't want to like, but to these people, it's not as much an epithet as obviously we would view it now. But yeah, I mean, Charlie clearly is standing up for his right, and then the kind of the number 10 guy who's just a shit stir from like every time he's on screen, he also is like, he's doing it to maybe stir up shit a little bit, but he's also, you know, quoting the Constitution and the right of his right to vote regardless of his race. So it kind of sucks that it's like the Pinkertons are the bad guys and they're racist and everyone else is like a decent person here in Deadwood. That's almost kind of probably, I don't want to say everyone else because obviously Steve is a horrible racist, but it might not even be accurate that, you know, like the good people of Deadwood are on the general side and the Pinkertons are just shown as shit heels every time they're on screen.
But the Pinkertons were shit heels.
Yeah, no, I agree.
In real life, it was just, you know, they were, you know, what are you going to pay them to do? Get rid of like union? Oh, sure, mines are trying to unionize. We'll get rid of them. You know, like that's what they did. So I think that some of the race stuff I found most fascinating was I always thought like if like Rue wasn't a character in season 1 or 2, like how weird season 3 would be, especially with the Chinese prostitutes and that kind of thing. But because he was in season 1 and 2 and you respect him so much, by the time he gets into season 3, where he's having to deal with this. I found that part really interesting, especially because I finally learnt where Deadwood was on a map, and it wasn't on the West Coast. So that kind of like, you know, how they've transported these women and all that kind of thing, and just how horrified Wu is. I really enjoyed, as much as you can enjoy seeing that, that aspect of like race dialogue in Deadwood.
Yeah.
I mean, as always,
Yeah, I love the
Wu and
evolution
Al are
of
just
Wu.
joyous.
I think it's great.
I agree completely. Wu is one of my favorite minor characters, and there's one point where Al realizes that he's hidden his peeps away because of what's going on in Deadwood and hasn't brought them into town yet, and Al just says, you know, very fucking, brilliant foresight there, Wu. And it's one of the very rare times Al pays anyone a compliment for their strategizing and their thinking. I love that partnership. I could watch Al and Wu all day long.
Yeah, he compliments Johnny by punching him in the face when Johnny's the one that figures it out before Al figures it out.
I also loved, one of the really lovely things in season 3, because we've talked a lot about what doesn't quite work, is the relationship between Jane and Joanie. And I suppose I had known Joanie was suicidal, but to sort of see it, to feel it, to hear it. And they're sort of, these two very broken people potentially coming together, I thought was just really beautifully acted and beautiful to watch. And then again, Jane, one of my favorite characters, teaching school children about the Civil War. Custer was a cunt. The end. I mean, it's just I think that's my single
also
favorite
accurate
line of the season. Also accurate, right? I mean, it's not a bad education, but oh, but that there was, I thought that was the payoff, right, of 2 seasons of watching these two quite damaged women kind of negotiating a man's world in slightly different ways, sort of coming together tentatively in season 3. I thought was just really beautifully done.
One of the
I thought
highlights.
it was such a good callback to like season 1, like where Jane was happy when she was dealing with the smallpox patients, when she was caring for others, and that's what Joanie finds, like some reprieve from her depression is helping the school children, even if it's just using the building that she owns. Like that's something that she can do. Jane's just the best though. Every time she's on screen, even when she's shitting her pants, it's great.
Yeah,
yes,
I think they were really, really, really good actors. Robin Weigert and Kim Dickens are both excellent, and like when you see, I think like Joanie hates herself because she's been predatory toward young women like her whole life. Not like that's just the path she was forced upon. And then to see her, with the little kids in class and stuff, and then with Jane, and trying to like not loathe herself. It's I don't know. I really think their relationship is probably the best part, maybe, of season 3. I don't know.
I agree. Yeah, I want to give a shout out to some other random lines which I thought were enjoyable, regardless of whether they were or were not, integral to the plot. So I find Al as a sort of management guru. Someone should write the sort of the management style of Al Swearingen. I think it would be hilarious. So this is one of my favorite quotes from him this season. "I'll kick your corpse in the ear for the waste of my fucking time." I mean, just like, there's just something brilliant about the invention of this. "I'll kick your corpse in the ear." Why the ear? Anyway, just superb. And then another one was when Calamity Jane and Aunt Lou have a drink together. Well, Calamity Jane invites Aunt Lou to a drink, and then she says, "Do not employ a mug, lest next week we be donning white gloves." So good. That's it for me. I just think that what I love about Deadwood, even in a season which I think might not have been quite as tightly plotted or as credibly plotted as I would have liked, is just at the sentence level, at the language level, at the delivery of individual lines level, it just remains so classy. Like, it's just one of the best shows for that. Even a bad season is still a phenomenal season relative to a lot of other TV.
Yeah, I will say that. I mean, and that's, I think, why ultimately I was sort of struggling with whether to go sub 3 on my Peaches scale, is that it is still, it's very, the way that it is written and the way that it's acted is enjoyable. Like, so even in the Langriche or the theater troupe scenes where I'm literally watching them going like, why is this happening? They're still enjoyable to listen to. Even if there's nothing else enjoyable about them, and obviously there are still plenty of scenes with characters that I actually care about. But
Exactly.
yeah, the writing, the acting is excellent regardless.
In retrospect, like what I enjoyed about Langriche is every time he interacts with Al, you get this idea that like life used to be simpler, but because they are both older now and they're looking at a place to stay, what they actually have to delve into, they can't cut and run anymore. Both of them are at that stage of their life where they just need to find a place to have a good couple of years and then die. And they've, Al has decided that's Deadwood, and Langriche is still trying to find it, and he hopes it's Deadwood. But in all of their interactions, there's this feeling like it used to be easier. Why is it so hard now? Which I really enjoy seeing both like Ian McShane and Brian Cox do this, because I feel anyone on set watching that would just be like in awe, because it translates so well to the screen as well.
I agree. Should we talk a bit about finale and the saving Trixie by killing another woman plot?
Sure.
Because I found that a bit problematic. Not that Al would do it, because Al does have a ruthlessness about him, and I've thought from season 1 that he loves Trixie in his own special way. But I did find it kind of, I'm not sure if I would have thought that Seth and Charlie would necessarily go along with that. And maybe it's just characteristic of how everyone just wants to get Hearst the fuck out of town by this point, so they'll do anything. And it spoke, I guess, to the commoditization of women, and that they are ultimately disposable. But it just felt, even for Al, character development as we'd seen in a sort of fundamental decency running through him, that this was a step too far. But what did you all think?
I agree with you about Seth and Charlie. I think that I mean, it's just absolutely untrue about Al, right? I mean, to the extent that I have a little bit of a problem with the show, like I love Al, obviously, like the same way that I love, Tony Soprano or Avon Barksdale or anybody, right? Like any morally problematic characters. But the fact is that Al is a monster, right? I mean, like Al has made a career of brutalizing women and selling them. Al has certainly murdered many, many prostitutes. Al runs criminal gangs that ambush people, families in the woods and murder them, right? I mean, like Al is 100% a monster. And so like, I think that I don't think there's any doubt whatsoever that Al would kill any number of prostitutes if he thought that it would enrich him personally. He does have a soft spot for Trixie. I think that's absolutely true. He's capable, he's not a robot, right? I mean, he's capable of forming emotional attachments. But I don't think that there's no doubt in my mind that Al would kill prostitutes to the extent that it helps him financially. But yeah, I think that the way that they passed over without comment any sort of response from the more upstanding characters, I guess very briefly, like, so I forget who, Saul maybe asked him if he had already killed a decoy prostitute, but Al was coy with him. Al didn't even say like, yes, she's absolutely dead, no, I'm not fucking with you. I can't remember exactly. I think Al said he had already done it, and Saul said, is that true? And Al said, what the fuck does it matter if it is true? Something along those lines, if I'm not mistaken. But yeah, the idea that everybody is just fine with like, well, yeah, probably should murder a random prostitute and give her to Hearst, I think is something that deserved at the very least more attention on Seth and Charlie's response.
I think it's season 2. I don't remember exactly what the situation was, but Al has murdered someone in his office in season 2, and the blood stain's still on the floor. And Seth comes up, I think, to watch a document being signed or something, and he acknowledges the blood stain and steps over it. And, I think he's made some sort of peace with that Al is on some level, and certainly in the Hearst case, he knows this, acting in the best interests not only of the camp, but here specifically of Alma Garrett, that he's acted to protect her, and that this is in furtherance of that. And I think he says at the very end he's going to have a hard time putting his head to the pillow that night, but that he's on some level at peace with making an alliance with Al and knowing everything, or accepting everything that entails.
I wonder if what's really happening here is that Al actually, this is very consistent with Al, but because over watching these 3 seasons rather quickly, I've sort of fallen a little bit in love with him and started to excuse his behavior in the same way that one excuses Tony Soprano's behavior because he's very charismatic. So that when you're forced to see the brutal reality of what he is in that season finale, rather than admit to myself that I've been suckered in by a charismatic, violent psycho, I think, it's bad writing. It's not consistent with his behavior.
Yeah, I think it's Dan says at one point, this is just the kind of murder that you preach, Al, which is something that'll avoid more trouble down the line. Kind of like I don't think Al is like kills people very pragmatically. He doesn't just kill people to kill people. He does it to further his commercial interests.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. But I mean, I think that he certainly does not shy away from killing people when it's financially practical for him. Although I do actually, I mean, since you brought it up, what's your impression of why he killed everyone? What's your impression of why he killed the Pinkerton agent?
He hates Pinkertons, first of all.
He hates Pinkertons, sure, yeah.
And I think that guy beat up Merrick. I mean, he makes a special point.
So that one was personal, you think more?
I think there was, yeah.
Okay.
I mean,
that's my impression also.
It's underdoing, Hearst's plans, but I think personally he dislikes Pinkertons, and he dislikes this guy in particular for he accuses him. Do we know that that's the guy that shot at Alma? I don't know.
No, but I guess he accuses her of that.
Yeah, and then he further knows that that's the guy that beat up Merrick, which he takes personally. At least that's my impression.
It did seem more personal. I mean, it just, since you happen to mention that it was usually practical with Al, I thought I would ask.
I mean, couldn't you make the same case for Hearst? It's not personal; it's practical.
Oh,
or
absolutely.
Do you think he goes beyond it?
That's why I think Hearst could have been really great. I think in a season where they didn't write him as just like so completely the bad guy, right? Like if you had a Hearst who is a bit more like the Hearst from the end of season 2, and you just have him do terrible things, right? Like, so he's applying pressure, more and more pressure on Alma to sell. At the same time, he's murdering, Cornishmen that are trying to unionize at the mines, right? Like you have him do all this stuff, but you don't have him in such stark conflict with Al, and such stark, like, I'll burn this, camp to the ground before, that kind of thing, right? Like he doesn't, if he was less gross personally, right? Like, I mean, one thing that I think, perfectly reasonably, I'm not complaining. I mean, I think it's a little bit of a problematic trope or whatever, but like one thing that, you can never forgive a character for in a TV show, right, is when they rape someone or try to rape somebody, which obviously that's true. I think it's kind of overused to signify badness or whatever, but I think, you sort of lost anything from Hearst when he says, I almost raped Mrs. Garrett, right? It's just like, at that point, it's like, well, then you can't do anything with Hearst again, right? Like Hearst is now painted completely one color, and you can't do any sort of like redemptive sort of thing with him.
But all of like Al's interactions with like sexual interactions with Trixie in season 1 had that feeling to it. Like it felt like she had no choice.
I totally agree with you. I mean, that's definitely true. I think that actually pretty much all of Al's interactions with his prostitutes are like that, right? Because I mean, he essentially, he does control access to their bodies, and they don't, but they don't paint it that way in the show, right? The show is not saying this is a man who was going to rape someone. It is rape, basically, because he's their pimp and they don't have any choice. They don't have the ability to say yes or no. So it absolutely is rape, but the show doesn't paint it that way. And that's the same thing, like, you know, and so Hearst, by saying I almost raped Mrs. Garrett, he doesn't actually commit a rape, but the fact that he said that he wanted to has put him in a place where he seems worse than Al, even though practically speaking, no, he's not. But I mean, I think that's about
the difference between like coercion and violence.
Well, and also just like the language of the television show. But yeah, because Al's also physically violent with people, that prostitutes that work for him. So.
Yeah, because I found the difference between like Al and Hearst is that like Al is like small scale capitalism and Hearst is like large scale capitalism. Like he will come in and demolish Deadwood so he can have the mind that he wants. Where Al is, no, I will stay here and still be a terrible person. But people will have jobs and they can kind of have their own lives.
I mean, they both are self-interested and want to make money. Isn't the difference that Al sees the survival and the thriving of the camp as helpful to him, which Hearst doesn't see? He's not invested in it in that way.
Yeah, and because of that, exactly, because of that investment, like all the people that we now care about as characters and everything. Yeah, that's exactly it.
And all the people he cares about. I mean, there's a wonderful scene. It's either at the start of the season or the end of the last. I think it might have been the end of the last, where Al's just standing on his balcony with a cup of tea, just surveying the camp and what he has in large part sustained and created and twisted and formed to his own ends. But it's beautiful. There's almost a kind of caring, paternalistic, proprietorial look about him, even though actually in reality it's rather predatory and dictatorial. And I guess that's the duality of Al that I love so much, and why I find the final episode challenging, even though it probably is exactly what he would have done. And that's why I find Hearst a thinner character, because Hearst doesn't have that. And maybe that is the appropriate antagonist to Al. I just wonder what would have happened in season 4. And I do find it slightly anticlimactic that Hearst sort of just slithers off into the sunset. And I wonder if he might have come back. Or, you know, Hearst was set up to be the antagonist this season. It doesn't feel like Milch was setting up anyone to be the antagonist for next season in his place.
I don't know the fully the details of what Milch's plans were for season 4. I think Bullock is going to lose the election. I'm pretty sure of that. But other than that, I don't really know what his plans were. Dermot, if he was here, he would be the expert in knowing what the season 4 plans would have been.
Yeah, maybe I'll do a bit of reading up before the movie and before the next episode of this podcast. Or we can get one of the OG.
Don't.
Yeah, just watch the movie and then
watch the movie.
Yeah,
and then
just watch the movie.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll watch the movie after I've watched The Crown, which will be like tomorrow. So, is there anything else we should talk about on the season? I felt we haven't discussed Alma, but I just found her rather dull.
I do not get the draw of her.
I agree, but particularly in this season, I was quite happy when she slithered off as well.
I liked her in previous seasons, but I found her. I didn't find any. I guess I would say I didn't find anything particularly compelling about her this season.
I did like, and if you ever rewatch, you can kind of watch Jen, who is not really much of a character, but you know that she's going to have an importance at the end. But I like her in this season. Jen is always like, she's talking when they're having the town meeting, and she's talking with the other prostitutes, and she's like, I guess having, you know, if you don't have a dick, I forget how she says it, but you know, you can own a bank and you still don't.
You can own a bank, but if you have a pussy, then
yeah. And then she's also like, when Alma's taking refuge in the gem, you know, like she's kind of leading them, like they kind of want to talk to, like Alma is in such an elevated position over their lives that they can't even really imagine, even though like she walks the same streets and everything, that they can't even kind of imagine what it's like to be her. And I find that really interesting, kind of class disparity.
Hmm.
Yeah, I
This
agree.
is the season that Doc thinks he's dying, right?
Yeah.
Which also seems
Yeah.
to somehow go
Just
nowhere. I don't
go
really know
away
how,
once Al yells at him. It just kind of.
yeah, I don't know how tuberculosis normally develops. Maybe it has like a relapse kind of a thing. I don't know. You know, I have no idea. But that was
At this period of time, it did, like, a lot of people, like California and especially San Francisco was advertised as like a place if you had TB because like of the dry air.
Yeah.
But depending on, I guess, the people's constitution, other people went to like very cold mountains, which is why the Swiss Alps had so many like sanatoriums there as well. But you know, that dry kind of mountainous air seemed to be really good. So maybe Doc's TB could have entered like a little bit of a latency phase and flared up again.
Yeah, I mean,
TB back then was a tough one.
A moment's pause.
I mean, certainly. I mean, given that I know nothing about it, right? I mean, like everybody knows like the Doc Holliday thing, right? Like he got diagnosed.
Hey, wait! I thought we were all epidemiologists now.
Yeah, just viral now. We don't know anything about bacteria.
Do we have anything else to say on season 3? Because I'm conscious, as much as I love this discussion, that the crown awaits.
I just wanted to. Poldark. Has anyone seen Poldark? Or just because we're talking about mining and Cornishmen, and then redemption of characters for the committed rape.
I have not watched Poldark. I watched.
Okay.
I'm so glad this is going this way.
I watched the first couple of seasons, but then it all got a bit too ridiculous for words, so I just sort of gave up.
Okay, no spoilers then.
Yeah,
okay,
well, no, I know broadly what happened because it was sort of like, it was so popular at the time that it was the chatter of England.
So I then went and read all the books, and he gets I don't even want to go into it, but he's like counsels his son to go rape someone later on in the story.
Really?
It's
wow.
This is just when you're like starting to like kind of forgive him. I don't know, or whatever. But then he tells his son that like basically a little bit of force will help a woman make up her mind often, or something like that.
So when were these books written? What era?
Oh, I think the first one was like right after World War II, and then like the last one was in the 70s.
Gosh. So
yeah.
I mean, not that long ago.
Thank you for listening, and I don't remember what the formal sign. I'm sorry. I don't
think there is a formal sign.
The one podcast I ever hosted, and like I sort of hosted it, and then Dagos Rivers edited it or whatever. But like I was trying to do the sign in and the sign out were the worst. It was just like, thank you. I know, goodbye. I have no idea.
Well, I think that serves as well as any.
Excellent.
I've just been binge watching The Crown.
But I keep meaning to and then not doing it.
It's incredibly well acted and well put together. And I think this season will attract a lot of viewers because it's the Diana Charles season. Mm. So basically woke up, had a huge English breakfast, watched a couple of episodes, and then forced myself to do a bit of exercise, which was a mistake after the full English breakfast.
Yeah, I would
went for a COVID swab test, as one does in these times. Came home, watched another episode. We'll podcast with you, and then no doubt watch a whole bunch of other episodes. That's it. I am.
You're talking about The Crown, right?
Yeah.
I'm starting watching it after this, and probably finishing watching it after this, if season 3 is anything to go by.
I mean, I literally just came upstairs, put on my PJs, and got into bed for this call because I know that afterwards I'm going to go downstairs, lie on the sofa, and just watch the rest of the season. It's so pathetic. But it's the Diana Charles one. I feel so personally invested in it because, you know, that was my lifetime. I was the kid in primary school who was forced to do patriotic little flags and be rejoicing at the wedding, and it feels like the story of my childhood, so I'm very into it. What's your background today, Thomas? What are we looking at here?
It's everyone's background now, Bina. How do you not recognize this?
Yeah, it's the Four Seasons landscaping.
They released, apparently, I was told on a previous Zoom call this week, they released a specifically Zoom-sized photograph for people to use.
I mean, the marketing that they've had from that is just phenomenal. I love it. It's so good. But he hasn't conceded yet, right? He's not going to concede.
He's not going to concede.
So what happens? Well, I mean,
I think nothing. Basically, it'll all be the same. I was thinking about it, and in no way a defense of an appalling, horrible person in so many ways, but in no way a defense. But it is kind of weird that we even do the concede thing, right? Like, it's not like at the end of a football game, you have to like line up the Cowboys and be like, we did lose, and we want to acknowledge the fact that we lost this game.
Like in college, or high school, you kind of get together and
you shake hands. Sure. I'm just saying it's a little bit weird that it is a whole thing where it's just like the media has to call it and then you immediately have to concede.
Well, I don't think the media calling it is important, but I think conceding is
it's certainly
almost a necessary step. I don't know.
Well, we kind of have the same thing, right? Because our election, the polls usually close at 10 o'clock. You get an exit poll, which is pretty obvious on who's won. And then literally, or sometimes it takes till 3 a.m. if it's closer. But certainly by the time everyone wakes up at 7 o'clock the next day, you've got the result. And then the leader, the prime minister, if he's lost, or whether he's won or lost, really, or she, has to drive to the Queen at a certain time and is told by the Queen to form another government in her name or fuck off. Thank you for your service. And then the leader of opposition.
That part is obviously weird that you have to go to the Queen first.
But that's also an issue with.
Isn't there like a key handing over ceremony? Like, here's the keys to 10 Downing Street. Have fun. I've shat everywhere.
The point is that when the current prime minister, if they have lost, has been to the Queen and been told in no uncertain terms that they are not being asked to form, because there's no government. When we go to the election, we dissolve our government. We assign
that's
government,
what I was gonna.
So at that point, you're not actually the prime minister. You're fighting for. So in a sense, we don't need to concede because you've already the job's been taken away, but you're still living in 10 Downing Street. So at the point you go to the Queen and she says, "Well, I'm not going to invite you to form a government," you go back to Downing Street, get your stuff, and move out. And then by the time the leader of the opposition, who's won the election, goes to the Queen and she says, "Please form a government in my name," they then drive to 10 Downing Street and take ownership that day. So there's no shilly-shallying about. It's just so
it's definitely the
people have spoken.
But that's how America could solve this, right? What you could say is that you stop being president on November 2nd to contest the election, and that would stop the whole concession nonsense.
Yeah.
Does the US have the same amount of bureaucrats that stay in place no matter who wins or loses to help run the next government, though?
Sure,
or are they all politically appointed?
Bureaucrats.
I think the proportion is more political appointees than it would be here, right? But there's a backbone that keeps things running. I
think the vast majority are career
civil servants.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, because evidently government is still functioning and has indeed functioned.
The fact that government has functioned for the past 4 years with the people in charge is remarkable in and of itself.
There was a really weird time where after the Brexit referendum so that's not a normal election, so the Prime Minister hadn't resigned to contest it. So the Brexit referendum obviously was won by the Brexiteers. So the Prime Minister obviously resigned because he, if the people have voted against your wishes, you can't in all honour remain Prime Minister. So he resigned. So we had no leader of the government. And we then
there's no problem with staying in power when people have voted against you, but
no, here we would.
Yeah, it's an interesting. It's definitely like a cultural thing there, but a weird one to me. for sure.
How can you go to the entire populace with a question that you are campaigning for? I mean, if they reject it, they are in fact rejecting you and your advice.
No, but they're only rejecting a part of you, right? Like all of David Cameron's political philosophy was not wrapped. Like he has other things he cares about besides Brexit that people might agree with him on. I'm not arguing that he should. But also, it's obviously a cultural thing there.
But also, you can't be the prime minister and execute Brexit if you don't believe in it. Although, then again, the next prime minister turned.
I mean, you definitely could.
But anyway, so he resigned, and then the opposition leader resigned, and then the leader of the Liberal Democrats resigned. So we had effectively no leaders of any political parties, and the only kind of institutional leader who was still in place was the Queen. She was the only thing holding the fabric of the Constitution together until all the political parties got their act together, and you sort of thought, thank God she's around. I mean, it really was quite a phenomenal week.
Yeah, I've heard interesting arguments about having in the US, some sort of like, essentially powerless, non-partisan head of state sort of figure to do some of that, like to pull some like the ceremonial stuff off the president's plate, and then B to do things like that and just be sort of a stable thing in the government, sort of.
I mean, you did have that, and you did rather reject it.
Yeah, I hate that, so I'm not. Yeah, the thought here that politicians actually believe in anything that they would quit over rather than staying in power because that's what they believe in is ridiculous to me.
You don't think if the American president went to the people with a referendum and lost, he would?
Like the midterm elections are often a referendum on the president.
And they usually reject the president.
But we don't have prime ministers resign because their party did badly in the local elections, which are like your midterms and happen sort of halfway through. I mean, I think that's more seen as, I think it's more expected that whoever's in power, the opposition will do better in our version of the midterms just because they're dissatisfied by that point. But people don't resign over it unless it's a real shellacking. But I don't think anyone's ever resigned over doing badly in the local elections.
I mean, I'm not sure, I'm not a historian or anything, but like, I don't think a US president has ever resigned over anything political like that. Like, I don't think that's ever happened.
Nixon's the only one that's ever resigned.
Yeah, right. And I mean, and that's obviously was a personal scandal. Criminal conspiracy.
CJ didn't run for a second term because he didn't want the job. Same with Gerald Ford.
Yeah, I mean, again, like I think that it's definitely, it's a cultural thing in the UK to do that. And
mind you, very few people do resign. I'm trying to think. David Cameron resigned, but Theresa May was effectively ousted by her party. Margaret Thatcher was ousted by her party. The rest lost elections. I'm trying to think who was the last person to resign. It might have been after the Suez Crisis, right? Maybe the Prime Minister resigned after that, I think. Alec Douglas-Home. Or not Alec Douglas-Home.
My English history knowledge is not particularly strong.
I mean, what's phenomenal is that our equivalent of the Republicans, so the Conservative Party, which is my party, has a history of being a ruthless vote-winning machine. So it tends to, if it feels that the current prime minister or the current leader of the party is not likely to win the next election, it does have a history of torching them. So famously torched Margaret Thatcher, even though she had like the most successful vote-winning record in history because they felt she'd become too unpopular and got rid of her. I mean, it's quite a ruthless party in that respect. Party does come before leader. Whereas the Labour Party, the opposition party, arguably hasn't been as successful electorally because it doesn't have the balls to kind of torch its leaders.
I miss ruthless Labour parties. I come from a country where our Labour Party just does not have the teeth where it used to. Same with like the UK Labour Party. Like, fuck me, in the like first half of like last century, they were like ballsy motherfuckers, and now they're just like toothless cats.
Yeah, that's why the Conservatives always win. Because ultimately, you look at Boris Johnson, who's basically become a liability with COVID. Everybody in the party knows that they will let him carry on for the rest of COVID to sort of take the fall. But before the next election, they will absolutely knife him and get a new person in. It's just so obvious.
I look forward to that. I love that.
I love the Tory party elections. It's brilliant. And it pisses everyone else off because we're sort of electing the new prime minister, and it's only the membership, which is tiny, that's doing it. I mean, there's so much wrong with it, right? But it is quite fun. The other kind of interesting thing in this country is there's nothing to stop you being a member of every political party. So for an investment of something like $200, you can vote in all the elections for the leader. And if you're Machiavellian, and I'm not saying I am, but why on earth would I know this if I weren't? You can vote for the person you want to be leader of your own party and vote for whoever you think would be a disaster for the opposition.
Yeah, I think it's generally here you're taking on trust that you're actually voting in a primary of a party you intend.
Yeah, but you
are open to.
Again, this is why the Conservatives win, because I voted for Jeremy Corbyn as leader of the opposition party because I thought it'd be a disaster. And why wouldn't you?
I love it. But in the US, what they would do is they would set up a fund for people to do it, and then there would be like some form of Senate committee several years later to look into it, and nothing would change.
Oh, that's a problem with honour systems, isn't it? So the UK system's a bizarre mix of honour and dishonour.
In 2016, I voted in the Democratic primary because the line was shorter. I got to the really polling true, place. Michael? What?
Is that really true?
Yeah. I was also I have a good friend who's a communist and really wanted me to go and vote for Bernie, and there wasn't anybody on the ticket in the Republican primary in 2016 that was tolerable in any way, so I didn't mind that much anyway.
So you as a Republican you voted for Bernie.
Oh, I mean, I'm not a Republican anyway. Okay. I'm a libertarian, but I never vote I never go to our I forget what we call it. It's not a caucus. It's I don't know what the libertarians call their little presidential nominating thing, but I never vote in those because they're gonna lose.
Oh, anyway, this is fun. Thomas, maybe you want to.
Sure. Apologies, Dana, for if you were expecting to talk about Deadwood season 3. But
Dude, I live in WA. I like to know that the rest of the world is still on fire. Why I live in my cozy little isolated state that's like, you know what, fuck everyone.
Yeah, I'm not 100% convinced the world's not going to still be on fire, but I think Trump firing the Secretary of Defense could be just petty Trump bullshit that he wasn't loyal enough, or it could be him putting loyal people in place to run the Defense Department during the next stage. So hopefully it's just petty Trump bullshit, but we'll see, I guess.
So you think Trump's basically packing defense so that if he refuses to leave the White House, he's got people on his side?
I think there's a possibility, yeah.
There is a possibility. I think you're right. But
what I was really looking forward to is the Secret Service dragging Trump out of the front of the White House and his nails scratching the door frame, and then that being part of the tour for the White House for the rest of it's up until someone else redecorates, right? That's what I was looking forward to. But if that's not going to happen.
My personal feeling is that the Republicans aren't saying, the senior Republicans aren't saying anything because they need his base to win Georgia. Once Georgia's done, they'll tell him to fuck off. But, I mean, that's a long time though, right? I mean, that's January.
Yeah.
That's past Safe Harbor Day. So what happens on Safe Harbor Day? Electoral college votes are cast according to how they should be cast, or?
Who knows? Yeah. I don't know that. I mean, electors actually, I think, in some cases can cast votes however they want to cast votes.
Yeah, I think it.
You're absolutely right. You could have a democratic state where the electors decide to just vote for Trump, right?
Yeah, but the electors.
Oh, it depends, state to state, right? Yeah. So some states have that set up. Some states are if we're all Democratic, all of the votes go to Democratic. Some states, but very few, have a breakdown thing. But the whole Safe Harbor Day, because of the Al Gore election. I don't know how I know this, the 2000 election, because of Florida and everything, there was a few Supreme Court rulings that actually limit both Trump and Biden in calling things. So it essentially looks like December the 12th is a cutoff date. So, but the Supreme Court essentially said 3 or 4 days before December the 12th, like to stop counting Florida
Mm.
in the 2000 election. So if they're going by Supreme Court precedent, they are quite time limited.
Although that's a bad one to cite for precedent, just because that decision also said it's not a precedent. It's what we're doing right now, but no one ever look at this decision again. It's a decision for right now, and please don't ever talk about it for anything else.
I would love it if this somehow got to the Supreme Court though, and Amy Coney Barrett was like, "Fuck you, I'll vote as I want to vote." Like, this isn't the mafia.
It doesn't seem
No,
like,
no, she's going to vote how her
her
husband tells her to vote. I have no faith in like her weird side of Catholicism. It's not good. I don't think she has her own opinions.
Is she a weird side of the Catholicism? Is she Opus Dei or something?
Yes.
She's not Opus Dei. She's something else.
She's American Opus Dei. It comes from America. It's an American version of Opus Dei. So they have very strict like gender roles. So the fact that she still has a job and she's part of it is kind of weird. It almost looks like she's a plant, but that's my weird conspiracy thing. But I sound like those people who wouldn't vote for JFK because he was a Catholic and he would answer to the Pope. I don't think she would answer to the Pope. I do think she would answer to her main religious leader.
But why? They don't need Trump. I mean, they've got the court, right? Or is it they think if they have Trump and then Clarence Thomas dies or resigns and they get another judge and then Roe versus, I mean, is that the end game?
I mean, I don't know for sure. I think that the Republicans could certainly think that they have the votes for Roe now.
Exactly. I mean, they've got the court, so why do they need Trump? I mean, they have the court, so
Yeah, I mean, I think as far as like a tactical decision like that, I'm not sure that they do.
So my whole theory is that I don't think Joe Biden wants the Senate. I mean, he can't say this publicly, because if he has the Senate, then he will have the mandate for far more progressive policy than he really wants to implement. Yeah, and also, if he has the Senate, he will be forced to answer the question of whether he wants to pack court, which I don't think he does. So I think Biden's probably praying for Georgia to be Republican. I think Kamala wants Georgia. I don't think Biden wants Georgia.
Yeah, I mean, maybe. I'm not sure. I don't know.
Who knows? Who can see into
50
the heart?
50 is also narrow enough, right? I mean, that like with 50, you might not like Manchin or somebody like that, right? Might not necessarily go with you on court packing and stuff like that anyway.
True. And the lower house is closer than ever now, isn't it, as well, which I find phenomenal.
Tighter, yeah.
Yeah. We shall see. Interesting times we live in. So if you had to make a bet today, if we had a little friendly wager, do you think Biden is sworn in on schedule in January?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
And do you think Trump ever concedes?
No.
I think that if he does, it'll be in a mealy-mouthed way.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think that he'll say concede or anything, and I think it'll be, I guess one thing I was thinking about.
Let me put this another way. Do you think Trump voluntarily leaves the White House before the inauguration?
Yeah, I think he will.
But I hope not.
Okay, I'll leave this in the after show and we'll see if we were right in due course.
Like, I think at some point Trump will acknowledge that he has lost power. I don't know that he will ever acknowledge that he lost the vote, and I don't think that he'll ever concede the election, but I do think that he will acknowledge that he is going to be leaving the White House.
I think he'll I don't think he'll go to the inauguration. He'll be gone before.
I have two final wagers for you. This time next year, do you think Trump will still be married to Melania?
Sure.
Yes, but I don't feel strongly about it.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't care less, but I think so. I don't know.
I think they're going to have the same marriage that they had before he got elected, which is marriage in quotation marks.
Like, she lives somewhere and he lives somewhere and whatever.
Yeah.
This time next year, do you think Trump is in court defending himself for something.
God, I hope
Civil
so.
or criminal?
Both. Let it be both.
Civil.
Yes,
He'll
sure.
definitely
Yes.
he'll definitely be embroiled in some civil lawsuits.
Criminal?
I don't think so. That's very dangerous in America for.
The dangerous precedent's also unclear to the extent that he can pardon himself. Generally, the U.S. presidential pardon power is very, very broad. I think probably he can pardon himself. From what I've heard from the lawyer podcasts that I listen to and stuff. Not that I'm personally an expert in any way, but it sounds like he probably can pardon himself, which would take care of any potential federal issues. That's even if Biden wanted to prosecute him, which I suspect Biden agrees with Thomas that would be dangerous, which leaves just like New York or something like that. Like, can New York come up with something to prosecute him for? Yeah,
Probably.
maybe. Yeah. So I don't know. I guess I would bet no, but I wouldn't be surprised.
Final wager. Do you think a Trump of any kind will be on the Republican ticket in 2024?
Oh, like will they win the primary?
No.
Yeah, so they'll be on the ticket. There'll be a Trump on the ticket.
I don't know.
Which also could mean vice presidential nominee.
I guess I will say no, but again, would be totally unsurprised if the answer was yes. But I'd still, if I had to bet, I'd bet no.
And
Yeah,
which
I feel
Trump
most
would it
confident
be?
about that one.
Really? Okay.
You think that the Republican Party will not repeat that?
Correct. I don't. I mean, they've surprised me in the past, but I can't imagine it. I guess.
Okay.
I think if it is one of them, it'll be Donald again. I don't think
He'll be like
Donald Jr. or Eric or any of the others have the whatever to actually get the nomination.
How old will he be? I mean, how old is he now?
78, I think.
Yeah, it's not going to be Donald, is it? Don Jr., I think.
Biden's real old too. So.
Yeah, but I mean, like, everyone thought that was a problem. It's just they thought Trump was more problematic, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, no, I don't think many people actually positively cast a vote for Joe Biden.
Sure, yeah. I mean, obviously plenty of people did, but yeah, in terms of percentage per the
Did
proportion,
Did they?
I'm sure. I'm sure lots of people did. Lots of people voted for him in the primary as well, right? I mean,
Of the record, yeah. But again, how many people in the primary voted for Biden positively, as opposed to I think he's an old white man, he might be able to get Trump out?
Yeah, I mean, that's arguable, but I mean, like Biden's big. Yeah. I don't know. I think he has. I think there's some moderate like stability, some appeal to him as a moderate who will create like a stable, business as usual sort of government. I think probably that has appeal for a lot of people. Definitely not as much appeal as thank God Trump is gone, right? Like I think that has even more appeal for more people. But like I think that there probably is some genuine, Biden's the guy to make things regular.
Well,
see,
good.
Biden to me feels like John McCain in a lot of like business as usual. Like neither of them seem to have extraordinarily strong opinions about anything.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah, it was just like, no, you want like a stable old white person, like just a stable old politician, actually. Like the end days of Margaret Thatcher. Like that's what people who voted
Margaret
for Thatcher
Thatcher
wanted.
She was not a stable politician in the end days.
Yeah.
Margaret Thatcher.
Oh, yeah, her last couple of years a bit iffy.
Anyway, back to Deadwood. If we were ever in Deadwood.
I don't think we were ever close.